Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good wherever you are on the planet. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day two of the National Performance Network Annual Conference, coming to you here virtually. My name is Jonas Sato, and I have the extreme privilege of serving as the board chair for the board of directors of this wonderful organization and my pronouns are she, her. I'm calling in from Ramaytush Ohlone land, otherwise known as the San Francisco Bay Area, beautiful Bay Area. And I welcome you today too. Um, I hope that everyone has been soaking in all the magic and all the um, intense and informative conversations that happened on day one. Day two is no different, including the showcase that we'll have. And if folks can kind of be active in the chat, we always love that. It's a great place for people to meet. Um, and, as a kind of a prompt and a warm up, uh, if anyone if you can name well, tell folks who you are and where you're from, and then also, something that you heard yesterday that lifted your spirit, or someone who you met, either through listening or through the chat, or an old friend that you revisited yesterday that just lifted your spirits and lifted your hearts. Um, I'll start. I had a nice little chat with George Lug yesterday, and it was quite lovely. So, it was so overjoyed to get to connect in that way. So please feel free to drop in the chat. Um, that function is live during each session, so feel free to use it with abandon and connect with each other on the attendee tab. If you look on your platform, you can learn more about the attendees, send connections and requests, and set up virtual meetings with each other. Ooh, exciting. Okay. And then share resources, reflections, questions, takeaways, and more. To do that, just click on the events forum tab to continue conversations. And folks can get together in groups, say that you've just listened to something, have more questions, want to talk about a session that you just attended, please feel free to use that. Um, the next thing that we have up to start our morning, just briefly, is we wanted to introduce you to the amazing people who sit on the board of directors of the National Performance Network of NPN here. And uh, we're going to do intros now to all those fine folks and my colleagues, the NPN board.
Hello, my name is Dave Fina McMillan. Hello, NPN family. Hi. I wish we could be together in person, but here we are. I'm a proud board member of NPN and I have my own consulting practice, McMillan Works. And I just wanted to send a note of love and light. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the stolen land of the Apache Navajo Nation and 18 Pueblos. So just a reminder for us to all remember what matters and to find ways to create spaciousness and stillness in our lives and moments of laughter. Hugs to you all, dear ones.
Hi, I'm Asia Freeman, Artistic Director of Bunnell Street Art Center in Homer, Alaska, and my pronouns are she, her. Welcome to NPN's 2023 annual conference. What I love most about serving on this board is building artist power, the amazing people we get to meet, and learning from all of our members, our presenters, and our leaders at NPN. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Ayenga Bokamba. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm an independent artist. And I love NPN. And one of the things I love about being on the board is all of the transformative, absolutely game-changing, life-changing conversations we get to have as we figure out ways to support artists to create life-changing, game-changing art. So thanks y'all for being here and look forward to seeing you at the conference. Bye now.
Hello, my name is Jorge Rojas, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm an artist, performer, curator, and art educator. I joined MPN in 2009 and have served on the MPN board since 2017. I'm currently based in the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes, also known as Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm grateful and proud to serve on the board of the National Performance Network, an organization that has nurtured and supported my work and that has taught and inspired me for 13 years. Over the years, I've been able to incorporate into my own work, practice, and community much of what I've learned and the inspiration I've gained from NPN's brilliant network of artists and the organization's commitment to advancing racial and cultural justice through the arts. For this, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you for being here and for contributing to this year's conference.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, wherever you are. I am Marlene Ramirez Cancio, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of Emerge NYC at BAX, Brooklyn Arts Exchange, here in Brooklyn, New York, Lenapehoking, where I'm speaking to you right now. I'm also a really happy member of the NPN Board of Directors, which is an incredible group of people doing amazing things for arts and culture in the United States and beyond, I would argue. So thank you for being here in our annual conference. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you have amazing reflections. And I'll see you online.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, everyone on the board. That was amazing to see everyone's beautiful faces. I absolutely love serving on this board, and I cannot say enough about um, the people, the work that we've done. Uh, you know, so proud, so happy to serve NPN. Next up, I wanted to get us started into the day, my friends, is today's keynote. We had an amazing keynote yesterday. Today, a dialectic for our times, organized by Sage Crump, director of NPN's new Department of Racial Justice and Movement Building, better known as Dr. Jam, is coming up with an amazing slate of speakers, including Kai Barrow, Charlene Carruthers, and Adrienne Marie Brown. Whoa. Enjoy, and I'll see you later.
Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome. My name is Sage Crump, and I am Director of Racial Justice and Movement Building at the National Performance Network. I'm currently coming to you from New Orleans, also known as Bobancha. We in New Orleans acknowledge the indigenous lands that we're on. They are the home of the Atakpa, the Caddo, the Chitimacha, the Choctaw, the Homa, the Natchez, and the Tunica people, and many other names and nations that have been lost to colonization. We encourage you to find the lands that you are on so that you can acknowledge both the ancestral history and the current history of resistance of our indigenous comrades. I want to welcome you to this plenary today for the NPN Annual Conference 2023. The title of this plenary is A Dialectic for Our Time. We dropped a definition of dialectic in the description for this session. Just a philosophical argument or discussion that has many sides. Well, when you talk about the relationship between art, culture, justice, and the transformation of the world, we feel like you just can't spend too much time understanding the context in which that work is happening to ensure that we are all moving in a direction that feels like it is and that it is intentional around its desire to create a world that has dignity, humanity, freedom, and liberation for us all. I personally like to think about dialectics as sort of things that are crashing into and tumbling over, each other in the current moment, and that what we'll be engaged in today is thinking about and being in discussion around what are conceptual containers that can hold it all, ground us, and point us in a direction towards liberation and freedom through the cultural work and artistic presentation of three brilliant, radical, badass Black women that I'm really excited to be in conversation with today. We have Kai Barrow, who is a visual and performance artist, one of the founders of Insight, and we're excited that Kai is with us. Thank you. Welcome, Kai. We have Charlene Carruthers, one of the founders, first inaugural national director of BYP 100, Black Youth Project 100, who is an author and a filmmaker. And so we're excited to welcome Charlene Carruthers with us today. And we have, hi Charlene, and we have Adrienne Marie Brown, author. I don't know if I should call you a librettist, who is also now working in the performance world with a new opera called To Feel a Thing that is moving around. So welcome, y'all. Welcome to this conversation. So good to have you.
Thank you, Say.
So folks, we're gonna have this conversation with a couple of layers. One, I wanna make sure that you get a chance to experience the artistic brilliance that all of these women are offering the world. So we're going to have some interludes where they will talk about their work. The four of us will be in conversation. This is a pre-recorded gathering. And so we're gonna encourage you to use the chat to be in conversation with each other and really engage the content that we're going to share today. So that's what's about to happen. I want to, how does that feel? How does that sound to you all? It sound like, I want to make sure I didn't misrepresent what you came in to do. what we're about to have. So one of the things I'm currently in a lot of conversation with, both internally, personally, and with a lot of folks in the arts field and in general, is how are we making meaning of the time we are currently living in? Like, what is this container that your work is being born into, that we are currently living into? What is the shape of the conditions that we're living in? And let's just start there. Let's start brick by brick, kind of putting this together. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on how are you making meaning and understanding this time that we are currently living in?
Okay, I have some thoughts. I think this is a time of massive awareness, like lots and lots of people coming into awareness of our interconnected crises. And people are coming into it from different angles. So they're like, the crisis is this, the crisis is that. But I feel like there's something shifting with pattern breaking. Like it feels like we're starting to be like, oh, there's patterns that need to break that are in all these systems. We need to de-silo how we think about the systems so that we can actually break the patterns in a large way. It feels like a time when we're seeding into ourselves and into our communities practices that return us to compatibility with our home, like our planet, with each other, with our community. We're like seeding those. It's like, this might take a while to bloom, but we need to put some seed down in the soil for what we're trying to live into and not just stay focused on naming the crisis over and over again. So it feels like, or naming the crises. I always want to bring in Grace Lee Boggs. She talked about it, transforming ourselves to transform the world. And I feel like a lot more people are seeing that they're like, oh, I am a front line, and what's happening inside my life and my family, that is also a front line of all these things. It's not just external. And I also want to uplift Maurice Mo Mitchell, talking about like what kind of movement is needed in this time. And we talked about the low barrier to entry and the high standard of practice. So I keep saying, like, how do we keep our hearts open to all the people who are coming into awareness and meet them where they're at and invite them to the future, like not as a destination, like we're going to this specific freedom, but as a process, like we are going to co-create something different and more liberated and better together. And I think art is one of the ways we make that invitation. So those are some things I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Charlene and Kai, how are you making sense of the world we're in?
Kai, you want to go? Okay, I never like to go first, but I can do second. It always takes me a
Good to
moment
know.
to warm up. It always takes me a moment to warm up in the conversation. So I really appreciate everything you just shared, Adrian. How I'm making sense of this time right now. You know, there's the how, like the actual like process in which I think about our times, and then what I think about our times are the two things that are circulating for me right now. And so the how I get to my like assessment of our times or understanding the meaning of it is oftentimes I look to history. So I spend a lot of time in historical archives, and some of the documents I work with go, you know, as far back as the 1700s or 1800s. Some of the like the primary documents, like folks' constitutions, founding documents, in and outside of what became the United States. Black folks, this documents, things that people have created that chronicle their lives. And so I've been looking a lot at how people made decisions with each other, how people related to each other, how Black folks and people indigenous to what became the US related to each other and continue to relate to each other. To me, because they signal opportunities for me to understand the things that I want and the people I'm in community with in relationship, the things that we want to be able to be in the practice of self-governance. But like, how has that happened before? What has happened historically? What might I and we be able to learn, and what might I be able to offer? And so my artistic work is very much so like that as well. I look very deeply into things that I feel aren't as present in contemporary stories about Black life and the interiority of Black life. And so in order for me to like have a deep understanding, I get a deeper understanding of the possibilities and the problems of sovereignty by looking at history. I get a deeper understanding of the possibilities and problems of democracy by looking at things historically. And the last thing I would say is how I make meaning through my work is I have a lot of grief from times that I wasn't even really, even though I was alive, I may have been alive in the 90s, but I wasn't politically aware in the 90s. And so Kai and I have talked about this quite a bit about the HIV and AIDS epidemic. It's something that I have a lot of grief about that I wasn't even directly impacted by at the time. And so it's deeply, it's a part of my artwork. It's something that like I didn't have to be an adult at the time to grieve about it and to bring it into our present day work.
Thank you so much.
I guess I have to go, huh? You know, I agree with everything that you all said. I appreciate those ideas. I like to go third. Comfortable third. You know, I mean, I think the question, how am I making meaning of this time that we're living in is a question that I ask myself every morning when I'm in the shower, listening to NPR news. Like, how am I understanding this moment? What is it that I am familiar with, and what is it that I'm not familiar with, right? And I hit 64 in January. So I'm in an interesting kind of, but I'm in an interesting kind of position because I've been a revolutionary in my mind since 1967. So I've had a critical kind of eye on the United States, on and the ways, frankly, on the United States and the ways in which the United States expands itself globally. And then my particular positionality as a Black person, then am I understanding myself as a feminist, and then am I understanding myself as a queer person, and now my understanding of myself as an aging person in this, freaking belly of the beast. And so as I'm thinking about what is happening, the redundancy of it is both infuriating. The redundancy of the moment is both infuriating and depressing, because it's not like I don't remember this moment, right, ever happening in my lifetime, right? I was a little girl, Black Power sister, you know, how we look, right? So that actually gives me so much joy in this moment, the joy of seeing myself from my context. And I'm just talking about, you know, I'm strictly speaking individually, right? I'm not thinking about us on a collective level, but I would say also we can expand that to think collectively in the sense that our communities have seen this moment before. We know us, right? Us in this room, us transformative people, our community knows who we are because we have seen each other grow in these different spaces that we live. And so there's a familiarity and a reckoning with who we are and what we aim to accomplish that is comforting for me in this moment. It is nostalgic for me in this moment. It is hopeful for me in this moment. And it is also terrifying for me in this moment, right? Because we're back here again. You know what I mean? Like, well, like how many opportunities have we had to transform from friggin' Rodney King? And I'll just like direct violence, not even the indirect violence, and the psychological harms that have existed. I do a lot of work around slavery, right? Like, talk about history. That shit, like going into the, can I curse?
Yes, you can.
Because I want to be a proper lady.
You can be all of yourself here.
But like, you know, when you're looking into the archives, what we know, what the minutia that we know about our ancestors and how our ancestors survived in this madness, right? Helps me, like that's the context. So ain't nothing really new, right? We've been here, right? Those bones that are in the bottom of the Middle Passage are the first political prisoners, right? They're the first ones who said, nah, right? And so we see how we've been in this process of liberating ourselves and trying to get free as long as we've existed. And so how I make meaning of those dialectics of hope and fear and frustration and impatience is through trust, right? Straight up through trust. So I trust the Charlene's and the Adrians and the Sages and the my grandbaby Isaiah's, you know, generation alphas that are about to like kind of come around because I've seen how it changes. And so now my thing is just like, be cool. You know, do yoga. It will change. Make some freaky art, do yoga, talk to the youth and the elders and like watch it, watch that seed. I love seeding. Watch that tree grow. And I think that's how we have to, so that's how I make meaning, like trees. Like we're like trees. Like that's an expansive timeline. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that's my third position. But I think everything that y'all laid out is really the nourishment and the roots of those trees. You see what I'm saying? And those things have to keep being in play, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. You know, a little, you know, a little, you know.
Well, I mean,
I know,
sure.
But it's,
like,
yeah.
no. Like, really.
But I think that's such an important.
If we knew so much, we'd be free by now.
we keep trying, and I really appreciate. There's like a really beautiful arc amongst the three of you all, like in the way that you shared, and the positionality you offered, Adrian, of like both yourself and this relationship to the world. And then Charlene, you're grounding like the relationship between history and how history, one of the things I believe really deeply is the way the current systems try and make us ahistorical, right? Like it pretends like, oh, this is all that's ever been, right? Like, and it's not even in our lifetimes. There have been different things that have existed in different systems that have existed in different ways of care and economies and all kinds of things. But let capitalism write the narrative, and all we've been is, Bitcoin and and trying to survive with phone 5 jobs, and then one of the notes I wrote about this conversation with the three of you all is that I knew that it was going to be one that could hold contradiction, tensions, and complexity, right? Like that it can hold all of that. And I think that goes back into like what artistic spaces can offer and artistic work can offer in supporting people's ability to be in the flow of that kind of complexity and trust and hope and grief, and where in my historical context and in my personal life am I aligned with what I believe and about the transformation of the world. This is always one of those moments where I'm like, I feel good, I feel rich. Whoa, this is great. I can roll up this conversation just this much for a little while. I do want to talk about what it means, and I'm gonna go backwards, Kaisa. I'm gonna come back to you because I love where you started around where you ended with like talking to your grandbabies and making art, and our relationship is started around eco-hybridity and art making together, and so as someone, and this is going to be a conversation for all of y'all who have such deep lineage and history in like political movement, formations. Talk to me a little bit about where you're, some folks are like, I've always been an artist. I've just now had time, or maybe art became, creative practice became a thing where you're like, actually, this is what I'm turning towards because of X, Y, and Z. But I would love to hear a little bit of y'all's trajectory, starting with you, Kayi.
Okay, that's a fun conversation. So I read Toni Morrison's book, The Bluest Eye, when it first came out. So I think I was maybe like 12, right? And it just like, oh, I get this. I get this, because the italics is one voice and the serif, right, or whatever, is another voice. And look at how these voices are interacting. And I was like, oh, bow down. You know what I mean? Like, that just like blew my mind, how a device of writing how a visual device could transform and help communicate a story, and I also was so impacted by that book, right, and all of Ms. Morrison's work, right? Like when I was pregnant, first time I went to my OB/GYN, who was also, he was from the community. I was like, I know this is a stupid question, but I'm just gonna ask you because you're a family friend. Can a baby be born without a navel? Because I was like Song of Solomon, right? I was like, Miss Morrison, you make like that line in Paradise, they shoot the white girl first. I read that, like I bought.
With the rest, they take their time.
Oh my God. I was on the subway. I read that line and I stayed in New York, right? I turned to the person, I was like, whoa, let me read you this. So art has always felt to me like the most exciting shit ever. And it's been like a way that I could just be so excited and happy and thoughtful and playful and like subterfuge, right? And so I read Miss Morrison right after I had finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and while I was reading the Communist Manifesto, right? And so I was like, I'm a revolutionary and an artist. You know what I mean? So I was that kid. And at that point, it has been a process in both ways of trying to identify what does it mean? How do those two things come together, right? Like this space of experimentation, of subterfuge, of play, of not knowing. Like how do you grow that intentionally? How do you grow that strategically? How do you speak that language? And so I've really been trying to learn, and I used to dance, you know what I mean? I used to write, I done the things. I did everything but play an instrument. That's not my jam. I love music. Don't have that, nothing about me is on the rhythm.
Okay.
Nothing about me is on beat, right? I'm on beat. But like, I love it. But like, other mediums, you know, I've touched in, but I think the visuals are the most, they're the places I disappear to. I probably am a better writer, not fiction, but yeah, maybe. I'm a better writer, maybe skill set if I were to try it, but I don't know how you do it, Shirley. It's the hardest thing ever. But visual, and you too, Sage, but visuals both are difficult and challenging and exciting. And I love the smell of paint. I love to get all up in it. I love it. I'm painting now again. After a while, I put my whole body into the work. And it's a way that I just kind of merge all those different mediums together, and the experimentation in that I think is a language, and the people who can speak that language can get with you. It doesn't shout. It's like, it's a way to talk about shifting. And so for me, that's been where I wanted to put my time in the last, like since I hit probably my 50s. I think in my 50s, I went to Paris, right, for my for the summer of my 50th birthday, and I had a vision. And it was like, you can either let this go and keep doing the kind of, you know, kind of work that you've been doing, the kind of life that you've been doing in the bigger picture, which was about sacrifice to other goals, I'll say, or you can commit to the art. And I was like, I'm gonna commit to the art, you know, like, and since then it's been that struggle to learn it, because I don't have a formal training. And so it makes it very different to try to reach a language that can be understood in the broader art industrial complex and beyond. And then more specifically in community with people who I'm in dialogue with, who often understand the work far better than the art industrial complex, quite frankly. Quite frankly. So like just being in that kind of a space is, I think for me, where I want to spend my time right now.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I took a lot of time with that.
That's all right. What I'm gonna do is ask each of you to answer that, but also take a moment and share your work after each of you answers. So Kai, you sent us some images of the work you're speaking of, and I think now feels like a really great time to share those.
Okay.
And you can talk us through them a bit.
Okay, so I'm working with this network of folks that we call Gallery of the Streets. And it's interesting, Adrian, we're working on what I've termed a visual opera. And so it's creating a story or a narrative using visuals. And at this point, our visuals are site-specific installations. So what is happening here is the libretto, the storyline for those installations. So you'll see a lot of masking, a lot of glass. There's a lot of kind of common textures that I'm using. This is collage work. This piece is called Transformation, and it's the opera follows an abolitionist, is called an abolitionist tarot, and follows a journey of fugitives who are trying to get out of miserableism. And so as they're trying to get out of miserableism, they're coming into this land where they are engaging a series of beings, teachers, leaders, what have you. And this piece, this card, this this picture here is called In the Hull of the Ship, Transformation, and the idea around death. And as an installation, we'll be working with potentially places like the Utah, the salt mines, where you see like foot washing and different kinds of geographic places in our installation. So I don't know. That's
Okay.
not get too complicated, but that's it is a libretto for where we will be landing installations and not performances, but mostly installations around the country. So we're getting moving on that now. This one is called Outlaws in the Sea. And so a group of us will be doing some scuba diving and doing an installation under the water. And this is where the outlaws are showing up, this chorus of outlaws who are guiding us through this process. The idea, again, is to identify some of the wreckages from slave ships, and also think about, as I said earlier, this is like these bones are the unnamed resistors. And so how we think about water and sea is as resistance, not not as this passive force. So this is Outlaws in the Sea. That's Peaches at the beach. And that's just like one of the characters, Peaches, before she goes under. And she ends up having that thing with the moon. But we and these are collages. They're about 16 by 20. They're become shadow boxes. So each of these, this is like the picture of the image outside of the box, but within the box, there's these whole worlds that these fugitives are involved in. I think this is the last one, right?
This is the last one. And I just want to ask you, you said 16 by 20 inches or feet? So the people are.
Inches. I'm working now on a 10-foot by 26-foot, rendition of this. As it is just taking so long.
I just know, I know you sometimes do large pieces, so I just wanted to clarify.
But these are the short term. These ones are in boxes. Like these have been exhibited. This is Outlaws in the Rocks. And so here the fugitives are in the I think this is the not the Joshua Tree. This is in Utah, and the Black Rocks, what do they call Hoodoo Rocks in Utah. And so the fugitives, I've been looking at how fugitives escape in the West Coast, under the water, and where are the fugitives running, right? And so these kind of compelling locations, these locations we call locations of the marvelous, are like places we've been going to do site research, and then I brought back some of the images and put them into these collages. So there'll be a libretto of the opera. Because with echo hybridity, Sage, if you recall, we did not have a libretto. And so now I'm dealing with this idea of moving stories, and I want to have a visual libretto to go along with it. So that's what I'm up to right now.
Thank you. It looks fun. It sounds amazing. Thank you for all of that. Charlene, listen, you said you want to be second. You're in the middle. Like if I reverse the order, you just stay second. You just stay in your sweet spot. Um, so I'm asking you the same question. Again, your history, the work that you've done, and the work you've known her. I've got a chance to watch. I've read Unapologetic. I've watched you speak in different places, and here you are. Adrian is the one who told me you were making a film, and I was like, really? Let's talk about that. So, share with us a little bit about that for you.
For sure. So first of all, Kayi dropping that she read The Bluest Eye when it came out. It's just like, dang.
And the Communist Manifesto at 12.
I also read The Bluest Eye when I was maybe 13 or 14. And that was around 1999, I would say. Some 2000, something like that. And it changed my life. Like, oh my gosh. It was just, I don't even know how I got it in my hands. Like I had one of my mother's friends would give me books. I think she was queer now looking back, it was never stated when I was a child, but looking back, I think it's a strong possibility because she also gave me April Sinclair's Coffee Will Make You Black. And I was a teenager when she gave it to me. And so I don't even remember her name. I need to ask my mother her name because she made a huge difference in my life by giving me literature written by Black feminists, Black lesbians, it was everything for me. And being in someone else's world for a moment allowed me to also be in my own world because I needed to be somewhere else at different times as a child in order to go back to my own world. Given I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Kay, you grew up on the south side of Chicago too. And so there were a lot of things that I found myself dissociating from as a child or just like moving through as a child. And so reading The Bluest Eye, reading about Pecola, Breed Love, it was life-changing. So I think that's when novels like Kayi, they were my entry point in so many ways into deepening my understanding of my own self and my people. But at an earlier age, I danced. I went to this school, Beasley Academic Center on the south side of Chicago, and we had a full legitimate dance studio and a real dance teacher. She taught us modern dance, all sorts of things. And so I was a dancer, I was a singer. From high school on through college, I did everything from wood sculpting to ceramics. And then after college and after graduate school for social work, my work as an artist and I got into organizing. My work as an artist damn near fell off. I wasn't really singing unless I was at a rally. I surely wasn't dancing in any ensemble or any sorts of public performances. And the writing that I would do was mostly nonfiction writing. And so when I transitioned out of full-time organizing around 2018, that's when I recommitted myself to my artistic practices. And so I remember, where did I start? I think I may have started the novel back then. It may have been around 2019, early to mid 2019 when I started to write a novel. And I'm still working on it. And I'm giving myself grace because thinking about how long it took Toni Morrison to write her first novel. years. So I'm not pressuring myself to finish it. But it's a story, a set of stories that I'm really excited to tell and share with the world. And then when we went into quarantine during the pandemic, the height of the beginning of the pandemic for us here in the US, I started to write poetry because I couldn't write anything longer than the forms of stanzas and lines of poetry. I had I couldn't write a paragraph, even though I know poems can be that sort of form as well, but I couldn't write a paragraph. I could only write in that sort of structure in a shorter form. And then which you all will see soon, I was reading Saidiya Hartman's book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, and just blew my little mind. The way she writes and the way she uses archival sources, and even the way she understands the archive, the way she approaches the archive, right? There's not one, like our bodies are archives. Like I don't think it's just like the formal like building that you go into. I love librarians. Shout out to all the librarians. And they are not the sole like guardians of archives. And so that book really opened up for me this like what my first film would be, because I knew I wanted to make films. Because for me, I'm going to tell the story in whatever medium I need to tell it in. That's how I feel. That's really how I feel. If I need to tell it through a poem, I'll tell it through a poem. So that means I need to study the form as well. Just like UK, I'm not trained as in poetry or trained in so-called creative writing. I know people can be trained in these things. I would say I'm definitely trained as like an academic, political, nonfiction writer. I have a lot of training in that. But with the filmmaking, I had to learn how to screenwrite. Like I studied, I read, I watched videos, I talked to people. I'm a writer and I'm a director. And so I also study film directing. Like I do those things in order to learn the form that I feel is necessary for the story that I want to tell. And yeah, I'm really excited. I don't know how I'll move in between all those things, but I used to think it was something wrong with me, but I think I'm okay. I think it's just my brain moves in a whole bunch of different directions, and expression to me can show up in a lot of different ways. I mean, it can even show up through cooking, frankly. Like I think creative expression also shows up for me in that way. Yeah, I think that's the thing for me. And unfortunately, it took me to transition out of full-time organizing to return to my art. And but it's always political. Like as a Black feminist, my work is always, everything is always political. It always has some greater, it serves a purpose beyond me, because I know once it's out in the world, I can't control it. And so I can put as much intention that I want to put into it, but someone can see something or feel something that I've created. I recently got back into ceramics in the past year. And I really enjoy hand building a lot, but I've gotten my most recent foray back into ceramics is on the wheel. But when someone sees something that I've made, they're going to take it in based on the time, place, and conditions in which they are experiencing it. So I enjoy it. I'm actually, this conversation is like, oh, I think I might have some juice in between writing this dissertation proposal that I'm working on right now, and maybe writing some more words in my novel. This conversation is getting me back to that. So yeah.
Well, I'm super excited. The conversation is getting, it feels like a juicy conversation. So I'm glad it's amping up your juice. And I love where you the journey you took us on, because I think there's a way sometimes folks read how we do where we do what we do as how we do what we do. And what I mean by that is this false binary of politics or art. And for the most part, people who are part of the NPN, who are watching this, who are with us right now, won't get into the like, oh, I'm apolitical, I don't make art that's not political. Like I think this audience is going to be a little savvier than that. Right, folks? Okay. And what I appreciate is the having left full-time organizing and moving more deeply into artistic practice can look like you've left one for the other. But what you said really clearly, Charlene, is, really clearly is, oh, all of this comes with me. All this always comes with me, right? Like all this. So it's not about like what medium or what, how I'm enacting. It's all a part of your politics, right? Like your politics. So speaking of which, let's see a trailer of your film. You want to set this up while I get it?
Sure. So the trailer we are going to see right now is of The Funnel, which is my directorial debut as a filmmaker. And it is The one thing I'll say before you all say, because I don't like to say too much about the film to introduce it, is that I spoke with another Black woman director, Alon Holt, who told me, don't forget, like bring in what you learned as an organizer into being a director. And it was the best advice I got because so much of how I work with organizers and how I develop organizers is how I work with actors. Pulling together a production is so much like pulling together a direct action. So I'll say more about the context of the film after you see the trailer.
Beautiful.
Things were different back then.
Ain't no rules reverse. I just got there first. Love it when you say my.
I want her scent, sage and flowing.
You don't have to worry about me saying anything about your little friend over there.
What's better than you?
You want to tell the whole world.
Nothing better for me, no.
So the funnel follows Trina and Taylor, and who is this young Black woman living on the south side of Chicago, who has this deeply spiritual experience that takes her back to experience a day in the life of one of her ancestors. And it takes place in 1946 in Chicago. And Sage, can you pull up the deck?
I sure can.
It takes place in 1946 in Chicago. And as I knew I wanted to make a film because I think that film, or I know that film and visual work, period, allows people to enter political thought and be exposed to political ideas in ways that like a rally won't, or a political education session won't, or a teach-in won't. But I can still politicize folks. And what I mean by that is expose people to ideas and agitate them around how they understand the world into thinking more broadly and more deeply in a more liberatory way. And so this is an excerpt from my director's lookbook that I developed. And so as you see in the center, Saidiya Hartman's book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, which is really about these like socially anarchist, young Black women, mostly in New York City and a little bit in Philadelphia, and I was like, I read this book and it was about the intimate lives of these Black folks and how people lived a lot of their lives in hallways. And you saw in the trailer, the one image of Taylor in the hallway. A lot of the film takes place in the hallway in like really tight spaces. And we didn't like make that up. Like, if I ever have enough time, we get it. I could talk about the location and just how challenging it was to find locations for a period piece. And period pieces are very challenging on their own, but I guess I like to do challenging shit. So that's why I did this. And I wanted to bring the story to Chicago because I said there must be a version of this in Chicago. And so I did some research and learned about the kitchenette buildings. Can you go back to the first slide quickly? And you'll see on the upper left-hand corner, this is the actual image from a kitchenette apartment on the south side of Chicago in 1946. That's the actual kitchenette building in the upper right-hand corner. The lower right hand, I believe, is from a tenement building, may or may not be Chicago. And then the lower right hand is actually who inspired the character who you saw in the red dress, Madame Lucy. This photo inspired the character Madame Lucy. Madame Lucy is the neighborhood spiritualist in the film. We can go to the next slide now. And so as I was doing my research on the film, I wrote the screenplay for a class, my Black Expressive Arts and Culture class. I'm now a third year PhD student at Northwestern in the Black Studies program. I came across this article that was about an actual kitchenette building in the 1940s that burned down. There was a fire. And on top of it, this building on the right, the photo you see, was built in place of it. And in the early 2000s or 2008, during the foreclosure crisis, Black people were displaced again from this building, from this condo building. And so I don't have any of the actual people names that actually happened in these two stories, but they really scaffold the film from present day or more contemporary times to 1946. I think there's one more slide. And this is from Gwendolyn Brooks, of course, world-renowned Chicago poet. She wrote a poem in 1963 about the kitchenette building and what it meant for Black people's lives. And I wish I actually had a slide for Richard Wright, because that's where I got the title of the film from, because he has this essay where he talks about kitchenettes, and he says the kitchenette is the funnel through which we live our polarized lives. And I really wanted to show that, this hallway and what people may understand, particularly, like a smaller part of the funnel and what comes out of it, it is just like Black people lived in these tight spaces, and they lived. They built relationships, they loved, they gossiped, they may have like cussed each other out every now and then, and they looked out for each other. And so the funnel has screened all over the US at this point, and we premiere in the UK at the British Film Institute Flair Festival later this month in like 2 weeks. We'll also be at the Patois Festival in New Orleans later this month, which I wish I could be there, but I can't be there in person, unfortunately. And so, yeah, and I'm really excited about where we are able to take this. And this is not a one-time, this is the last thing I'll say, it's not a one-time shot for me in film making. I directed another film titled La Salida, that is making its way around the film festival circuit right now. And I'm also just in the process of more screenwriting. Because this story, to me, every character actually deserves their own episode, and I want to see it become a limited series, like a limited episodic series. So been working on that too.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And if you don't live in New Orleans, I don't know, but those of us who do, hey.
I'm so excited I saw the film. My dad grew up in a kitchenette on the south side of Chicago, and I got the kitchenette piece. And so to hear you talk about it more, and also I was like, are kitchenettes like really specific to Chicago, or is that a northern thing? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
I will say I have not heard, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, all like Northeast, that branch of it. And I haven't heard this idea of the language of a kitchenette, like a kitchenette apartment before. So I'm curious about that.
Which is essentially like one part apartment that's meant for like a single family split up into 3 or 4 bedrooms.
Right.
You may or may not. Yep, you may or may not get the unit with the kitchen in it. Right. And then everybody on the floor shares a bathroom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My dad slept in the kitchen of a kitchenette when he was growing up on King Drive, which used to be Parkway. So I loved it, and as my dad just passed this year in July. And so watching that and just like how you're so committed to Chicago, I love it. One who was not in Chicago.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to move around to you, Adrienne Marie Brown. I feel like the first time I heard your name was in relation to like young voters in the first Obama election, right? So when you talk about like a history of like work in politics and all the things, and as a librettist for To Feel a Thing, like can you tell us about that arc and like what you've pulled through and what are you weaving together in this moment from all those spaces?
Well, I first have to say I'm feeling so rich from all this exposure to this radical Black political feminist art. It just feels very yummy to my spirit, and I am giving y'all both standing ovations just for the lives you've lived and for the artistic paths you have cut. It's dope. It's just dope, especially Charlene, because I remember being in meetings with you where I'm like, oh, you don't know I'm a novelist. I don't know you're a novelist. And anyway, it's just exciting to be in a different phase with you. When I was a little girl, I was always performing. I was always singing. I was always writing. I was always dancing. It was always going to be an artistic life. I just knew that for sure. And my mom says I was writing, like that she was like trying to give me the alphabet quickly because I was like, I just need more. I need to express myself. And I have a lot to say. And from there's like, I have journals from being a kid and like all the stories. I was always processing life into stories. Um, and then I was at the North Atlanta High School of Performing Arts. I was on my way. I was in the tour show. I wore fishnets and makeup and sang songs. I was just like, I'm the next Jasmine Guy. That's what the thing was at the moment. That's what it seemed like it was going to be a good thing. And I was so excited. And then my dad was in the military. We got stationed to move that summer to Germany. And I was supposed to go to this dance camp that Gregory Hines was going to teach us to tap dance. And I was like, this is it. I'm ready. And then they got that station. And I was like, they were like, we have to leave. We're leaving now. You're not going to get to go to camp. You're not. And I was like, you ruined my life. You have cut me at the root. Like I was sure it was over. And of course, we go to Germany. There's no artistic program. There's no choir. There's a journalism program. So I get into journalism. I start writing essays and nonfiction and opinion. And then I go to college and I get politicized. And Amadou Diallo was killed while I was there. And I was just like, this is it. This is the way. And I don't think it occurred to me. Like I would see people who were doing movement art, but it never occurred to me that little girl who wanted to dazzle everyone in my fishnets and my songs would make sense with movement. Like it just didn't click to me. And I was like, I'm a facilitator. I take that role very seriously. And in some ways I need to not shine in order to do that work well. And so I feel like I spent a long time trying to be unshiny. And like, if people were in meetings with me, they know that there was still like, I'd be like, oh, come back to attention or whatever. I would like throw my little bits in there that was like, I'm still an artist, but I thought it was in my past. I didn't know it was in my future. And every night, every day, I was writing songs. Like my phone, every phone I have is a voice memo full of songs. I write songs almost every day, but I would use them as process. So I would come home, like sometimes I actually remember a meeting with you, Charlene. I would come home from a meeting where I was like, we are heading in the wrong direction. And it was only like singing would help me know that. Like that man is taking up all the space. I would just be like, I don't know how to describe it, but it would be like something would start to come through, like while I was doing the dishes or something. And I'd be like, oh, that's how I really feel about it. So what I learned was like, I can't lie to myself when I'm singing. And I always had these stories. And around 2011, 2012, I started letting myself write the fiction out again. And I started this story that became Grievers, which is the first novella that I published. And it's the first novella of a Detroit trilogy. And it was like, I want to capture all this movement wisdom and all these ghosts of Detroit and Charity Hicks and Grace Lee Boggs and all these people who lived and died while I was there and who taught me so much. So they're all the characters in that book. And then Sage, you're a big part of how the singing became back in the forefront of my life, because I got locked out on my friend Danny's porch while I was being her doula. She went to take the baby to the doctor and I carried the baby and put it in the car, and then they took off, and then I went back and I was locked out. And I was like on the porch, no phone, in my pajamas in Cincinnati in the summer. And I spent the whole 2 hours singing this like opera. And that just, I'll never hear it again. It was there and gone. But I was like, this is the most fun. Like, you leave me alone on an island and I will be entertained. And I was like, I've shared that experience with Sage, and Sage was like, I know someone who like makes musicals and makes operas. This woman named May Ann. You want to talk to them? And we talked, and I was like, I have all these voice memos of songs, and I sent them to May Ann, and it has emerged into this now musical ritual that I'm doing a libretto for. And now my whole life just feels like art all the time. And I think it has been really healing for me to recognize that my revolutionary self is present in everything that I make, like to trust that. Because I think for a while I was like, I'm just going to go make pop music. Y'all not ready for how I just want to make simple, beautiful songs, right? But what keeps coming through all my songs is still everything I believe and everything I want to change, and emergent strategy and pleasure activism and all the things. So, and I think everybody has that. I actually think most of us are meant to spend our time creating in some way, and that we get distracted by having to stay alive inside of capitalism. And so we lose track of that part of ourselves that's actually supposed to be co-creating the world and giving people a way to understand and process the world. So I think that's a lot of my journey. I will say the fiction writing has been like, it's been really helpful medicine for me, both collaborative fiction writing with others and my solo fiction writing, because I think for a long time it was like a problem orientation to the world. Here's everything that is wrong, and we got to stop the wrong and like hold the line and try to combat that. And I got so hungry for the future. I was like, we need a different future. We need a different future. But the fiction brings it together so that like my analysis of now and my longing for the future have a place to play. And I think of myself as kind of writing case studies from the future of how we got free and how we change things, and what are the new problems, which feels like the Octavia Butler lineage in my work. You know, she's my patron saint, my goddess, this is her area. So yeah, I think that's some things. And I want to share with y'all one of the songs from the ritual. So the ritual, it has been an emergent process. I like sent them a bunch of songs. Them is Troy Anthony Burton, who's a gospel choir director who is helping build the gospel choir of this experience. So I sing one time by myself, and then every time, everything else is about being a part of the choir. And that's also something that's really important for my work right now, is how do we learn to be the choir? I think for a long time, it was like, you're preaching to the choir, you're preaching to the choir. I'm like, but what if the choir doesn't know how to be a choir? What if the choir is like really off key and out of sync, and no one, I love when you said that Kai is like, nothing about me is on rhythm. And I'm like, I think that's the whole thing, is how do we get used to more chaotic, complex rhythms, and how do we still sing together, and how do we still make something that sounds magnificent together? So the ritual is like, how do we create that space where we can come with our grief and we can pour out our pain and we can pour something into the middle. And then what we take back is like, there's room for each of us. There's actually room for each of us. And whatever future we're co-creating, there has to be room. All right. And it's non-linear. Trying to write a non-linear cyclical libretto is so fun, because everyone keeps being like, yeah, but what's the beginning, middle, and end? What's the story? And I'm like, it's being, it's existing. Feelings move in cycles. So that's been fun. The director is Charlotte Brathwaite, who just is blowing my mind. Everyone I'm working with, I'm hell of intimidated by too, which is how I like to work. So that's been good. All right. So just picture you're in a dark room. You come in, you're sitting around a small altar with dirt and water, and everyone's quiet. Come close to where the light is. It's time for the ritual. Come down, drop into your breath. It's time for the ritual. Don't be afraid of the night. It's time for the ritual. Come down into the darkness. It's time for the ritual. What is it that you need to feel? It's time for the ritual. No one should ever have hurt you. It's time for the ritual. And then everyone else starts to sing it from all around the room, and people start crying right away, and we go from there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much for sharing your journeys. I took a little time and have a couple of like questions for you each individually as well. And I gotta say, Charlene, I kind of want to start with you. So now you go. Here's your first.
That's okay. I'm warmed up. I'm all the way warmed up.
Beautiful. In just doing my research and prepping for the conversation today, I saw you describe the tunnel as an example of what is possible when love is a bridge. And I would love to, can you tell us what you think becomes possible when love is the bridge, and what is the bridge? Like, what is the shape of this bridge you're calling love, right?
So when love is a bridge, I think when we were like trying to figure out what's the tagline for the film going to be, I wrote a couple different things down, and I think I came up with it. I hope I'm not. I think I came up with it. My brain is a little foggy these days. It was either me or my producer. I'm pretty sure I did it. She can correct me if I'm wrong. Her name is Eliza Turner. The bridge, it's on a couple of different planes. One, it's a spiritual bridge between Taylor and Trina, the person the young Black woman who's living in 2008, and her great aunt who's living in 1946, who is her ancestor, who's a poet who wants to become a writer. And we see in the film that Trina is writing in like the 2008 time. She's writing a poem, and she's actually writing a poem one of the poems that I wrote during quarantine. Like I have one of my poems like in the film, and so I was like, shoot, I don't need to pay for somebody else's poem. I already wrote one myself. And so the bridge of ancestry, being able to connect through a spiritual vision, and also the bridge of writing, like writing across time, because I guess people should see the film. I don't think it's a spoiler alert, but literally the poem is written across time in the film. Like the poem becomes a bridge in between time periods. And I don't think I thought about it that way when I was writing the screenplay. Like, I wasn't like, oh, this is a bridge. But I knew that I wanted to connect. It would be a transition between the two time periods. And the love for me in the film, it is familial love. It is love between a mother and a daughter. It is love between one person and their art. It is love between two romantic lovers. It is love between next door neighbors, all sorts of love. And it deeply means caring for one another, being in struggle, being willing to be in struggle with one another, and also being responsible for one another, and deriving some level of joy and or pleasure, not all the time necessarily, but that is a fixture or a feature, I should say a feature of the relationship between people who love each other. And so, yeah, that's what it meant. That's what it means for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's so many places we could go, because as also someone who I get to talk to all kinds of theories about and how the world functions, I could go so many places. But specifically, I came across a quote. The way you describe your work is dialogic, oppositional, and erotic. And I am, with Black feminist theory as a point of departure. And I would love to hear how what makes that the grounding that you feel is needed in this moment, or is needed.
I work with materials. I do a lot of work with large scale paintings that are very textured, double-sided, take up a lot of space, and natural materials like sand and dirt. Right now I'm working with concertina wire and barbed wire. And so part of what I've been thinking about is the ways that how these materials impact our lives, both on a subtle level and also in a really direct level. So some of the so when I think about these locations, like I'm working with sand and thinking a lot about desert and thinking a lot about what deserts represent for African diasporic people and how we think about this material from both of its metaphoric context as well as its environmental context, right? So sand is currently basically at risk, because of the ways of capitalism, right? Um, Similarly, there's something erotic about sand. I don't know if you've ever put your feet in it. It's multiple, it comes in multiple colors, it has different textures. And so thinking about these materials from these, different, both their power as well as their, the way they're used in the context of capitalism. I think the concertina and barbed wire pieces I'm working with right now are just like, you can't look away from that. I'm doing a show at Contemporary Arts Center in New Orleans, opens April 1st, and I'm using glass and concertina wire. The show's called Undoing Time. And so I'm attempting to declaw the concertina wire. So thinking about the places that, how the museum is both a carceral location, but also potentially a harm reductionist space, a space that we can enter into as, visionaries, as rethinking our relationship to this world is kind of could be the role of the museum. So thinking about when I'm using concertina wire and barbed wire in a museum, there's a narrative that's happening between the work and the space, right? And so in that sense, that is, in my way of thinking, a dialogic that's rooted in a Black feminist and abolitionist analysis. And so that's the work I've been doing. And, like I said, this is the visual language piece. I'm also doing a public art installation for Prospect Public Arts Commission. And one of the pieces is called an Abolition Playground. And I have 4 blocks and 4 blocks of different types of installations. And one of the pieces I'm working on is it's called Talk Back. And it's going to be on Norman C. Francis Parkway, which used to be called Jefferson Davis Parkway. And I will be working with the former statue that was Jefferson Davis. So the talk back piece is like, so I'm still like working with this. So these kinds of ways, working with materials, working with sight, working with these multiple narratives is how I've been doing work, right now. But the libretto is fun.
Libretto is fun.
Gluing glass is good times.
And I say at the end of the day that this is also going to be the plenary that makes everybody wish they lived in New Orleans. We got patois and see the tunnel. We got this work coming. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much. And Adrian, I still hear your song in my head like right now, and I have like notes ahead of time, but I am, the question that's just coming up in me is what makes it time for the ritual?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like in my, I spent 25 years doing like facilitation primarily. And I feel somewhere in the midst of that, emergent strategy came through like very clearly. That was like, we need a different way. We need to like turn and look at different teachers. We need to turn and like get back our feet in the dirt, get back in the water, get back in relationship to the stars and the ants. And like, we need to stop being so egoistic about our humanity. Like we need to be like, maybe it's not just wrong between us, but like species level wrongness. And what would it look like to change, to really change, to be like, what if we're not the top? What if the dolphins are the top? What if the octopus are the top? What if the whales are the top or something? Um, what if it's not even hierarchical? Like, how do we let go of the hierarchy of species on the earth? All this stuff. And so emergent strategy led to these immersions. And at the immersions, what kept happening was these grief rituals. Like we were setting it up like, what are the conversations that need to happen in your community? Break into small groups, come up with some response that embodies emergent strategy. And I think the first few, we were expecting everyone to come back with like some really well facilitated conversational prompts or something. They kept coming back like, here's a portal of grief, and we're going to walk through it and name our ancestors. And here's a place where you can lay down and be told how beautiful you are and return to yourself. And here's like every single time, every group was just coming back with rituals and songs and rituals and songs and rituals and songs. And processing that during the pandemic, when we had to be apart from each other and we had more grief piling on, I was like, that's what we want and need. When humans get together in community, we want to remember where we come from and who we are and our purpose, and we want to feel stuff together. I think this is why theater is so exciting. I think this is what would sometimes happen in a room when I was facilitating, and I was like, what is that? This is some other thing. Like we're having a meeting and then something else just entered the room. And I often co-facilitated with Makani Temba, and Makani would have a whole temple set up in the corner. Like we need oranges because y'all need to be peeled back. And we need molasses because y'all need some sweetness because y'all sour and all this. And I was like, a lot of us facilitators are actually witching and spell casting and creating spaces for ritual and creating spaces for something to move. And so I was like, what if we cut out the middleman of a meeting and just went straight to ritual? And what would it look like to invite people in and be like, we don't quite know what's going to happen. Like I have a libretto, there's some songs, but what gets felt in the room is up to who comes in the room and what they're willing to feel. And so it's a test. It's all experimental. So we did it the first time just as a rehearsal, and we were in Oregon, which is the Oregon Shakespeare Festival commissioned the piece, which I was like, you commissioning me? Okay. I didn't know what that meant. Now I know. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a lot of work. But we did a rehearsal, and just in the rehearsal, we invited some other actors who were in the area at the time to come in, and people were like giving themselves, and they were standing up, and they were like, this is for my friend who just committed suicide. This is for my grandmother who I lost. Like people just were ready to bring their folks in. And we did it again in New York. And there, this whole multiracial element was really interesting because we're doing gospel songs. And, you know, white folks be the first one to jump up and be like, I'm gonna dance. I love this, right? And this whole beautiful thing played out, which I was like, oh, I've been longing for this kind of thing. Where first you see Black folks looking at the white folks like, what are you doing? You don't even, this is not your thing. You don't know what you're doing. And then kind of rebelliously getting up and being like, this is how you do it, right? This is how you do it, singing and dancing. And before you know it, everyone's singing and dancing. And we crossed over into, it's like, yes, all that is true. And also whatever future we're in this boat together. And y'all do need to learn how to sing and dance better. You do need to feel some kind of collective rhythm all together, right? So I think it's time for the ritual because we need to be in the spaces. We actually need to be together with who we're with, right? And we need, when we come together, we need to be invited to center what we're feeling and let that be good data about the direction we're heading and how we're going to get through this. I've been really playing lately with how much tension can a relationship hold? And can we talk about, like, when we come in and we're doing, to me, a ritual is a tense space. And you can feel it when the tension gives and you know that the spirit has entered the room, or that the knot that was at the center has come open. And so part of it is that I'm like, we're in a place as a species where there's impossible tension. And we need to create as many spaces as we can to let that release so that we can be flowing again towards a future that is compelling, that is exciting, that is worth the babies we're bringing into it, you know? So it's time for the ritual. It's either time for the ritual or it's time to just give up and die. And I would rather have the ritual, you know, and keep going.
Well, thank you. And we could keep going, but I know you are busy people with full lives. And so I hope we can continue this conversation on a back porch, a front porch, around a fire, somewhere, sometime in the future that we're co-creating. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for saying yes to this invitation. Thank you so much for the work that you're bringing into the world. I am so grateful to have been able to sit with you all in this
Thank you for
moment
this
and in this
gorgeous
configuration.
conversation, Sage.
Uh,
Thanks for steering the
Thank
ship
you.
with such grace.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for your own artistry as well. I know you continue to
Thank
hold
you.
space for other artists, but like for what
Yeah.
you're also creating.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I think, the ways that in the beginning we talked about the ways that you experiment and take risks. And I really do see this as part of your body of work. And so thank you for opening up the conversation. And you two, is always fun to talk with you. And I learned so much. Happy to be here and with amongst you. So yeah.
It's a
That's
Black
okay.
Southern conversation on the arts.
Yes.
Love y'all.
Take good care, everyone.
Love y'all. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. That was so amazing. I'm so inspired and so moved right now. Um, Sage, thank you so much for putting together that conversation. It's like giving me all the life that I need. And also, just thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for sharing not only like the grounding in in the spaces in which you move, but also like the beautiful and uh, just sharing with us, yourselves as artists in that process. And um, I know we have books to read, we have films to see, exhibits to enter into from that conversation alone. And so, thank you so much, Kai, Adrian, Charlene, and especially Sage for putting together that amazing start of our day. Um, if folks, I saw a lot of amazing conversations and comments going on inside of the chat, and so appreciate that. And if you have like any takeaways that you want to kind of send off this conversation with, please, feel free to use that function. Um, um, right now, as we shift, we're going to shift a little bit and get into the rest of our day. I'm going to pass it off to one of the NPN staff, Love, Love, otherwise known as Adam Love, Love Adam. I'm going to pass it on to Adam. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you. And I hope everyone loves me because I love me.
I love you.
Hi, everybody. How about this 2023 MPN virtual conference? Day one was great with many highlights, and we are off to a terrific start on day two. Shout out to everyone who has helped to make this event so, as I should say, badass. Thank you. Up next, just like yesterday, we have 2 rounds of breakout sessions. There are 2 live sessions during the breakouts at 2 p.m. and one at 3:30. The live sessions have a limited capacity, with one specifically for BIPOC participants. All the other sessions today have open attendance. All breakout sessions will have ASL and either closed captions or CART. If you have any trouble with this event platform or accessibility services, click on the help desk tab for further support or email virtual@conferencedirect.com. If an incident arises during the conference, please know that we have our rapid response team. They can be reached by email, which is caitlin@mpn.org. Remember, y'all, as Joni mentioned before, our platform is totally interactive. So join in on the chat now. and in every session. Take every opportunity to socialize with other attendees. How, you may ask? Well, it is under the Attendees tab. You can search profiles of speakers and fellow attendees. Use the smart filters to find people, request connections, and even set up meetings for one-on-one video conversations. And please use the Event Forums tab to participate in extended discussions. We welcome you all to share ideas, links, and resources. There's a forum for each of the breakout sessions, plenaries, and artist showcases. Speaking of artist showcases, y'all, today is the day. The first artist showcase watch party featuring an amazing lineup of artist performances is at 6 p.m. Central Time. So be there in your square. And don't forget to use hashtag MPN 2023 and MPN and hashtag MPN virtual on your social media platforms. Let the people know what's up. That concludes housekeeping on this March 16th, 2023.